thank you very much, everybody, for joining us this morning, and many thanks indeed to our wonderful speakers for joining us. We've got a fantastic lineup, and I can't wait to hear all the insights. I've had some really interesting conversations in the lead up to this this webinar, this forum, so it's super exciting. And for our first topic, we're going to be talking about Excel and some of the alternative softwares out there. I've just been reminding myself about the history of Microsoft Excel, so I've actually got a question for the audience to kick off. Who knows what year Microsoft introduced Excel? Put your answers in the chat box, quick as you can. What year do you reckon it was? Doesn't matter if we get it wrong, but any thoughts, just pop it in the chat box. And maybe that's not one for the speakers. I'm thinking some speakers might know the answer to that one. Oh, love the range we're getting. Fantastic. We've got some 80s and 90s. What's the oldest year we're getting here? 85, I can see there. Yeah, absolutely. And right through to into the 90s. Yeah, oh, 82 there too. Brilliant. Many thanks indeed. Yeah, so on a bit of research, it was indeed introduced, first of all, in 1982. It was multi-plan back in the day. And then in 85, for the person who said 85, it was Excel for Macs. It was interesting, it came out in Macintosh form, first of all. And it wasn't until 1987, it was Excel for Windows, which does make all of that, the first time it was introduced, nearly as old as me. And of course, back in the 1980s, it had to contend with Lotus 123, which certainly dates me. However, it did quickly become market leader. And it's amazing, you know, it's still around to the day, you know, more than 40 years on, we are still using Excel, or maybe we're not. Let's find out more about it. So I'd love to hear some of our speakers' thoughts on Excel, whether it's still the market leader or not, or whether we should be embracing new tools. So I'd like to go across to Mark, first of all. We've got Mark Proctor as one of our speakers. Mark, if you'd like to introduce yourself and then let me know about Excel, how it probably is the #1 tool used by accounting and finance professionals across all the industries. Why?
So hi everyone, I'm Mark Proctor. I teach people how to use Excel and Power BI to automate their month-end processes or their reporting processes. So effectively, it's about using tools so that they can automate their work, but using tools they've already got. I'm a Microsoft MVP, which basically means I talk too much about Excel and other technologies and just try and encourage people to make the most of it so they can automate their work. In terms of Louisa's question about is Excel the #1 tool for finance people, it's still the #1 most used tool for finance people, that's for sure. And I think that's still because it's still the most flexible tool that we have. It's easy to start with. It can do almost anything that we want. And actually, it puts most of the power as individuals into our hands rather than having to wait for IT. We've all been in those scenarios where IT have, where we want to change or something to an IT system, and then there's a change backlog or there's a change freeze, and therefore we end up having to take things into our own hands. And I think that's probably why Excel ends up being as flexible and as used as it is. Whether they're the right reasons or not is a different matter. I think that's why it's still the #1 used tool.
So do you reckon we can live without it then?
So I would say that we can live without Excel because Excel's the solution, right? So ultimately we start with we have a problem and then we need a solution. What people like to do at the minute is they like to make Excel the problem, but ultimately we have a problem and we have to solve that in some way. So we can eradicate Excel if we want to by either removing the problem or by finding a different way to answer that or to find a different solution to that problem. Now, the problem is that in terms of solutions that we have, a lot of them are not particularly cost effective. They have very long lead times. Again, IT are involved, and it means that we have to have change requests and everything else, which means the number of times that people have to take things out of whatever systems they've got and put them into Excel is quite high. And actually, generally, Excel is, because it is so flexible, it becomes almost like the second best tool for everything, right? You can do, you know, is it the best tool for BI? Probably not. Is it the best tool for creating a financial model? Probably not. Is it the best tool for all these other things? Probably not. But there are other tools that are better, but each of those come with a cost. And actually, if you had different tools for each of those elements, the skills that you would need in your staff base would be really high, because they'd all have to understand all these individual technologies and be able to handle those technologies, which are often more complex than we need, have more options than we need. So actually, if we did have specialist tools for everything, it would probably cause us quite a lot of problems. But yeah, if we can eradicate those problems, if we can find better ways to solve those problems, then yes. But really, it comes down to human behavior. And even if we can solve those problems, all it takes is one question from the CFO to say, where did this number come from? How did that work? Where did this come from? Can you do a quick bit of analysis on this? And then suddenly we're back to Excel because our systems are too rigid and designed for a specific purpose.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for sharing that. Well, what about some of the other tools that are out there, including the Microsoft ones like Power BI and also things like Python as well? Do you think they might replace Excel?
Well, all of those are, again, Power BI in itself is a tool which answers a specific problem. It's a reporting and analysis tool. So it provides some of the functionality that Excel has, but takes that further. So that if that's what you need, you go in that direction, take that further, but you still end up with Excel for all those other elements. Python is a programming language, so it's kind of, and with the announcement a couple of weeks ago that Python is now in Excel, et cetera, it's really about how you use those Python libraries rather than it being about how it replaces Excel. And then you've got other tools like Google Sheets and everything else, which are really like, they're the same, they're built on the same premise as Excel, but have a lot less functionality. And often that comes down to, it's a platform choice, isn't it? Do you want to use Microsoft, or do you want to use Google, or do you want to use something else? Ultimately, Google Sheets or whatever else, it's the same kind of solution.
Oh, thank you very much for that insight. Thank you. And I guess something would be great to touch on quickly, because I know we're going to be looking in more detail a bit later on in the webinar, is AI. Do you think AI is going to make spreadsheets obsolete?
Well, first of all, I think most people, the way a lot of people are using AI at the minute is to help their spreadsheets rather than making spreadsheets obsolete. I think the biggest issue with AI from a finance perspective is that black boxing, right? You put stuff in and some stuff comes out. All it takes is one person to ask the question, where did that number come from? How's that constructed? And actually you don't really know the answer, and you don't know whether AI knows that answer. So having traceability from your original records through to whatever you're doing, I think is critical. So I don't think AI is going to replace any of the tools that we currently have. It will supplement them or make us better at them, but it won't replace them.
That's fantastic to hear. Yeah, thank you very much for sharing that, Mark. Yeah, it's such a great point about the black box, isn't it? And traceability is so important for us as accountants and auditors, isn't it? To be able to know what's happened in that black box. So definitely something for us to get to grips with. Many thanks indeed for your thoughts on the subject, Mark.
Thank you.
Let's go over to Andrew now. So Andrew, it'd be great if you could introduce yourself and give us your thoughts on Excel. Is it dead, and should we invest in other software?
Hey, thanks, Louisa. Hi, everyone. Yeah, my name's Andrew Codd, ex-CFO, now CEO of AVF Worldwide, where we help organizations with their digital transformations and also doing more with less, which is impacting a lot of us. I also set up a few years ago a podcast called Strengthen the Numbers. We've listeners in over 171 countries and closing in on 400 episodes now. And the question you raised, Louise, actually takes me back. I think it's like to episode 47, where we had a smaller panel than this, and we asked the question: is Excel dead? And each person on there, Chris Argent from Generation CFO, Lance Rubin from Model Citizen, took an opinion, and we sort of debated it. And it's interesting, we're still having similar conversations, but now it looks like we're looking at more tools coming into the mix. And one of the great points, and I can't take credit for it, but it was raised on that podcast, that episode, was, there probably are more safer ways of driving a car, but we still drive cars. And I think it's the same with Excel, and whether it's dead or not. I mean, it's so ubiquitous. I mean, Mark made some great points, and it is just that ease of access, so quick to spin up. You don't have to wait for an IT ticket. We use it quite a lot for prototyping still. Before we use any other machines or things like Python or whatever. So yeah, I mean, I can still see it being used. And even if you take a step back, if you went to the heritages you touched on with Excel, I mean, Excel's been used. If there's a road network near you, or if there's a big company acquisition, or someone's going for an IPO, more than likely an Excel spreadsheet's been used as part of that process. We have a lot to be thankful for Excel for. Is that a good reason to keep using it? No. I mean, we had another podcast guest on, very interesting chap, and off air, he told me that one of the clients he was working at was a central bank, and they used Excel to consolidate all the information from the banks across the entire network within that country. I'm not naming which one. it's one close by, but they thankfully moved off that system now. But is Excel really the best consolidation tool when there's probably better ones out there? Now, the thing is, as you start going to other tools, you need skills to access them. So Python was mentioned. Python, like in the teams I've spun up, and this has been within finance as well, is you have to probably bring in people who are specialists at Python. Like for instance, I use Python to go and get my stock information off Yahoo Finance. I send the robot off, goes, does the job, brings it back, puts it into a CSV file that gets visualized then on my screen. I don't open Excel, but in the old days, you probably would have copy pasted something into Excel from that. So there's probably better ways. And I think that's where that in answering that question, is Excel dead? I can't see it myself, but maybe it's not the software. I mean, the software is amazing. It's even better than what I remember using. In the old days, I used to have a company, and we used to set up company dashboards and report to shareholders using Excel. It's got amazing functionality, much better functionality now. It's got the Python integration as well. So you can really do a lot with it. But the thinking at the moment out there is Excel holding people back from reaching the higher levels of analytics maturity? It's great getting data, getting its information, getting knowledge out, but really does it help drive the best insights that allow for more confident decision making? And you're probably then looking at other systems to help drive better foresight, which allow you to tap into more data science methods. And that's where we do a lot of our work nowadays.
Wow, that's really fascinating to hear about. And you mentioned lots of things there, and it made me think about how we can keep up with all the tech changes, whether it's in Excel itself or with some of the other software we might use with Excel.
Well, that's a really good question. Obviously, there's some great questions today, but no, I would suggest the big step is the people here today. The fact that they've come here is a big step. It's exposing yourself to these conversations, picking up what you find seems interesting and something you might try it out. And that's another point. It's actually trying these things out. Don't just taking the information on board and reflect on it, but actually maybe try and put it into practice. We touched on Python. There's other programming languages out there as well. I've tried a few different ones. You need to go and try them out. Put them into use cases. As I said, if it's getting your stock quotes, you can learn these things off Stack Overflow or YouTube videos. I mean, it's much more democratized than what it was 20 years ago in terms of understanding these technologies. Talking to people tuning into podcasts as well. At these events, networking with other people and finding out what's working well for them. That's what we do in the podcast, is you just share what's working in an accounting or finance organization, and what people are learning, and maybe that could be something they could try out in their area, or it might not work. But it's just putting this stuff into practice, and maybe not having Excel as the hammer and nail type of scenario, or the anchor holding you back. Because if you are using Excel, there's plenty of use cases where, I mean, if you don't have a lot of data, you don't need to spin up a data mart or build a warehouse to go access the data. You can pretty much get by with Excel. But if you are really looking to move into like advanced analytics, pattern recognition, generate foresights, I'll give you an example. A CRM, right? You can a lot of people. I mean, I used to work in sales before I became an accountant. You'd have these sales, there's a lot of sales data and whatever, and you'd have your file. And most people did their analysis in Excel. And then you go into the board or the sales review, and then people will be questioning your numbers because they're not the same numbers that what they see. And a lot of salespeople keep their information outside the system. But if you force people to use the CRM system as it was intended to set up, and you take Excel out of the workflow and force them to use a visualization tool like a Tableau or Power BI or one of the Salesforce.com add-ons, and you get them to use that. Now you're starting to use those tools for visualization and improve your analytics maturity. And we did it in one recent organization. They were relying on their Excel extracts. And once they started using the dashboard to interrogate their numbers and drill down and spot patterns, and not only that, once you've got the data that organized, when everyone's using the same system, you can start running some data science methods over the top, which improves your forecasting and confidence in decisions, because now you've got error bars, ranges, you're using behaviors to predict forward patterns and where things might land, give useful insights that turn into foresights, so you can get ahead of problems before they begin, based on what you've seen happen before. You actually open a lot more opportunity to make better, more confident decisions. So I think Excel's taken us a long way on the journey. It still has a role. But like in this client's example, they were able to have a 50% improvement in their weighted pipeline, not just understanding, but coverage in the space of 2 months. And they really needed it. So now they've actually got a better chance of hitting their revenue number for the year, because they did have a bit of a miss the year before. But they wouldn't have been able to do that in Excel. Now
Wow,
they have the confidence because they're using other tools to complement the decision making. So
that's really interesting to hear about that. That's something, isn't it? That 50% increase. Wow. And you mentioned quite some sort of statistical modeling and methods and things there, and data science. So do you think as accountants we all need to be data scientists?
yeah, I think we need an appreciation of what's possible. Again, talk to some data scientists, go to their forums, find out what they're working on, what they're doing. I don't think we need to be experts in it. Most accountants and finance professionals I've met are really smart people. We're very good at integrating what's going on and connecting dots. So maybe play to those strengths. What I found leading as a CFO formerly, and also my current work, is I bring in data scientists. There's so much. I find a lot of talent around the world. I've spun up teams in Egypt, Cairo, out of India, Pune, and Manila in the Philippines. Amazing talent, doesn't cost an arm and a leg. Seriously, I mean, I couldn't get over it. I used to have data scientists in the States, and they were 1/8 the cost elsewhere in the world. And this is what I was saying, do more with less. We've great talent globally. We don't need to access them in our country. Bring them in, they bring some different perspectives as well. They're very hungry, and they can teach us. We can teach them how to make better decisions, because I suppose we've had that longer commercial history of bigger organizations and doing stuff with data. So it's that blending. I think that's where the power is. So no need, appreciate what data science can do, but don't become a data scientist. Although, you can do pretty cool things if you do want to learn Python. My favorite project was building a retro arcade machine using Python, and then a bit of woodwork and a bit of electronics. And it's a good bit of fun for myself and my son. Now and again, we play on it still.
Oh, wow, that's fascinating to hear about. Thank you very much for sharing that. And that's really interesting what you were saying about data science and that appreciation for it. I love that connecting the dots. I think that's something that, is so important for us as accountants, isn't it? To communicate and connect the dots between different groups of people like data sciences. Well, many thanks indeed for your thoughts. That's very, very interesting, Andrew. And now I'd like to go over to Chris. Chris Reeve. So Chris, if you'd like to introduce yourself, and we'd love to hear about your practice management software, because I know you've moved away to some specialist practice management software, Chris. It's called Silverfin, isn't it? And it means that you don't use Excel so much as a consequence. So a bit of a different take. So we'd love to hear more about that, Chris.
Yeah, morning everyone. Chris Reeve from Gascoigne's Accountants. I'm a chartered accountant, running my own practice in Bury St Edmunds, Suffolk. We classically used Excel for our working papers, and then used some server-based accounts production software. And we moved to Silverfin in 2019, which was quite good timing. I think we moved about 6 months before the pandemic, which sort of enabled people to work from home without logging into the server. It's been really good. It automates the accounts with a automatic sync from. We mainly use QuickBooks, we use Xero as well, so we can prepare the accounts within those types of bookkeeping software, and then we sync straight into Silverfin. So we're often preparing accounts pre-year end, gives us a lot more checks that we can do. And then as the end of year transactions come in, automatically updates the accounts, updates our working paper schedules, gives us a lot of tips that we've got to do, and standardizes how we work. So it's both the working papers and the accounts with the syncing into the software, which has been great for us, to be honest with you.
That's really interesting to hear about, and many thanks for telling us about that. Are there occasions when it's helpful to use Excel? Do you find some of your team using it sometimes?
Yeah, I think for the like Andrew was saying, I think it's still going to be the product that you use a lot. I think where you need analysis of certain items, expenditure or income, and I think you'd still go back to, we use Silverfin for totally for the end of year accounts. I think any analysis work and data analytics will still be within the main software. Obviously the two sync, so there's no differential between the two, and then we'll drop that data out into Excel to go through it. I think there's still the advantage of that. So we do still do that all the time, but it's done to use it rather than preparing the working papers and accounts with it, I guess, really. So.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So you get the benefits of the specialist software, but then you've got Excel there when you need it. Yeah. Oh, many thanks for telling us about that. How about the process that you were going through, how to make that change to adapting to the new software in your firm, and how did that work?
Yeah, it was. I think we were ready for it. Really, we sort of wrote our own Excel working papers, and you know, we're accountants, I guess, not data scientists, as Andrew was saying. And even though it's a fairly simplistic tool, it was bringing about a few errors sometimes, and it was something that was really needed. It also saved us having really to save the working papers in, and there was a lot of I guess there was a lot of human error with making sure you had the right updated software and right updated working papers. And I guess staff were too often not sharing the right version, and there was version control errors. And I think when we did it in 2019, I think the staff really were ready for it. So I mean, Silverfin gave us a lot of training and support through it, and we tried to involve the staff with the you know, with the decision making really, and brought everyone from the team in to use it at the same time. It wasn't sort of we decided it and then sort of said there you go. It was, you know, involving them in that process. So when it came to switching over, I think they were pretty ready for it. Obviously there was a lot of I guess it took some time, didn't it, really, to bring it in with the changes that were made. But you know, I sort of think about sort of 3 to 6 months, and it was, you know, became really integral, to be honest with you, within the firm. And we've got several offices, and again, using cloud software, it really helped, rather than being in the server and, you know, having remote issues and other things that it brings. So
yeah, that's really interesting to hear about, and I think the timing was beneficial for you, wasn't it? You were saying with the start of the pandemic as well.
yeah, I mean, also, more luck than judgment with that one. Obviously, I certainly didn't see that one coming. But yeah,
No.
it was really handy that people weren't having to remote in and use the software on the server. So I think that would have slowed a lot of things down. So yeah.
And something else you're mentioning was about bringing in the software specialists, the software providers to help with the training as well. I was on an ICAW digital workshop recently, and that was really a message that lots of people were raising as well, as trying to use the software specialists as much as possible to help with the training, to really help people to use the software to its maximum as well, because the tech is evolving so quickly, isn't it? Whether it's Excel or any of these other products we're mentioning, there's so much to learn about, and it's keeping up to date with it. That's another way to do it, isn't it? And actually, with that in mind, it'd be great to hear your thoughts about how the tech is evolving for you. Do you find it is evolving, the tech you're using?
Yeah, it's changing all the time. I mean, Silverfin, originally it was the account production. They started off in Belgium, I believe, and brought it over to the UK. They've now launched the corporation tax, which has been great because obviously for the limited companies, you've got the two-way sync, so that your corporation tax is being completed at the same time as well. And they launched, I think about 6 months, a year ago, Silverfin Assistant. So there's great examples on the website with what that brings. One of the examples I did just quickly look this morning was where, you know, if you voted too many dividends in the accounts compared to the retained profits, the assistant will immediately flag that to you, rather than, for example, the trainees possibly not spotting it, giving it to the senior managers for review, and it's spotting that straight away for you. So there's loads of sort of tips and items that's bringing in. And I think with which I know you'll come to, the AI, you know, Silverfin are building that in. So there's going to be more and more of that to come to I guess start analysing the data for yourself as well. So, and I presume, you know, that will again reduce the reliance on Excel, I guess. So.
Oh, that's really interesting to hear about, isn't it? Yeah, so I think AI is it's very much all around us, isn't it? And it's getting embedded in so much software, isn't it? So yeah, that's really interesting to hear about. So yeah, I'm sure we'll pick up more on that with our other speaker shortly. So yeah, many thanks indeed for that, Chris.
Okay,
so thank you. So that's our section. We've been talking on Excel and other software. Really interesting to hear about all those different aspects to think about there. Lots of food for thought. So many thanks to our speakers for that. What we're going to move on to talk about now is all about data and data analytics. A survey landed in my email inbox just yesterday. It was from Accounts IQ, and it stated that accounting professionals had a number of significant pain points, which I'm sure is no surprise to all of us here today. And one of the things it did state was the inability to extract data insights or business intelligence. That can be a pain point, can't it, in terms of getting out the data to find out what's going on. So it'd be really great to discuss some data analytics in more detail in terms of current best practice and what we think we need to do next. So we're going to go over to Clive now, to Clive Webb. So I'd like to say hello to Clive, and Clive, if you'd like to introduce yourself. And I know actually you've got some thoughts just following on from Excel about over relying on Excel. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Okay, thank you, Louisa. Hello, everybody. So my name's Clive Webb. I'm the head of business management in ACCA, which is a research role. So I do a lot of understanding the views of our members, etc. And I think what Louisa was referring to, about a year ago, we did a survey looking particularly at the FP&A community, and rather unsurprisingly, just to back up what some of our earlier speakers have been saying, about 82% of them for budgeting and forecasting preferred Excel as the tool of choice. And I think that underlines a lot of what Mark and Andrew have been saying as well, in terms of the need to progress. And if you looked at the sort of comparable number for FP&A tools, that was about 18%. So that's about your ANA plans and tools like that. So I take the point almost that Chris made of actually there is a migration to understand what you're using a tool for and how you actually use the right tool in the right circumstance, but then interlink it with other tools as well. Does that mean we're probably over-reliant on Excel? Yes, it probably does. Does it mean that Excel will ever go away? No, it probably doesn't. But as an example, one large retailer that we talked to had their forecasting model in 26 different layers of Excel spreadsheets. And the propensity, as some of the speakers have made, for errors, for problems with that, or everything we know about end user computing, you worry about the accuracy, especially when we live in a world where we need to keep those models running, when we're moving increasingly away from monthly cycles or annual cycles into more predictive analytics, which is probably a key differentiator.
Brilliant. Well, many thanks for sharing your thoughts on that. And I guess with that, you were just talking about predictive analytics. So let's, I'd love to hear more thoughts of yours on data analytics and like where we should go from here.
Okay, so classically, and if you look at where a lot of the business intelligence work started, what we were trying to do was dig into what happened in the past and tell the narrative of the past, perhaps with a bit more confidence. So if you like, understanding the why question. What we're finding is that business leaders increasingly want the interpretation of the future. So it is what actually happens next. Can we use the data to model a range of scenarios? And that's particularly come out through the pandemic, but is continuing on through the tragic economic times that we have now. So predictive analytics says, actually, what can we use? What can we tell about the future? Which is where we're seeing the advent of the AI models come into the back of this, going, actually, what can we tell about the data? And we need to be cautious, and I'm sure my fellow speakers a little bit later on will be very cautious in the point that AI is a very broad church. And we may talk about ChatGPT and we may talk about generative AI, but actually we use a lot of AI in the modeling tools that are commercially available on the market to extract trends and data. The point about understanding the algorithms is absolutely right, but it's also about the value add of the finance professional understanding, if you like, the validity of the output, and that's where the value add comes in. So that conversation about will AI ever eliminate the accountant, the answer probably is no, because somebody has to interpret the data. So that's the point we get to. The final point, I think, on this, we aim for perfection. You know, can we iterate the planning model to the point at which we are 100% certain that is going to be the future? Well, it's never going to be the future because there are already too many variables. So it's stepping back and saying, well, what level of confidence of the data and the information do I need to ensure that I keep making the same decision? So it's about understanding your confidence intervals, if you like, classic statistics.
Oh, that's really interesting to hear about. Thank you. And actually, I guess with that in mind, thinking about things like confidence intervals and other statistical tools and things, What about the next generation of accountants, just thinking about the qualifications and the ACCA qualification? How is data analytics embedded in the qualification?
Okay, so there are strong data analytics pieces within a number of the papers, particularly a strategic business leader paper, where we get people to think about modeling using techniques like Excel, some of the future trends. There are progressive certificates in data analytics available for members and, in fact, non-members that take them, for those that are qualified, up to A, the same level, and B, beyond. And I think one of those is partnered with Columbia University, if my memory serves me right. So it is that journey. And I think some of the points you've made with the previous speakers about how we're aware of what the software can do, it's also how we're aware about what the capability we need to demonstrate. And this combination between understanding the data, being the data scientist, being the analytics, not necessarily expert, but being able to run the models and interpret the future, being the predictive analytics person, gives you that view of what might be that skill set. And that's really where the qualification is aiming towards. And it will continue to iterate. And a lot of the work that we do in Professional Insights is also bringing that to members as well. So
many thanks indeed. And do you think data analytics is going to become even more pertinent for accountants and finance leaders in their teams? And if so, how?
Okay, so I think we're probably going through the next iteration, next evolution, in that reporting and performance is increasingly not just simply about financial measures. It's about concepts like value. So what is it that an organization returns to society? In many ways, for many stakeholders, we're seeing IFRS S1, S2 likely to be incorporated for 2025 year ends in the UK. That changes how we think about performance, because we need to think about not just the financial returns, but also the sustainability issues and how that's going to affect the operating model. So thinking about analytics, it's thinking about that one view of performance and refining your KPIs, your balanced scorecards to be more holistic. And we're not going back from this. You know, S1 and S2 are not transitory things. Climate emergency is not necessarily transitory. So we have to incorporate that in the way business thinks. And if you're doing business in Europe as an organization, then you start coming into the CSRD type disclosures, which not only are about sustainability, but also about the social economy, human rights and human capital and governance. So it's, again, thinking about that and thinking about how you bring that into your analytical models. So I think there's a massive opportunity, but whether you can code all of that into Excel in a more subjective manner could be a key question I think people need to ask themselves. That could be the point where you get a little bit of the light bulb moment of, actually, is there a better tool I can use?
Wow, many thanks for sharing all your thoughts on that, Clive. Yeah, it's really interesting bringing sustainability into it. That's going to become even more pertinent, isn't it? And it's very pertinent already, of course. I think that may well be the topic for a future FITT forum, actually. I think there's a lot more we could discuss on that matter, isn't it? So yeah, it would be lovely to pick up on that in due course. Many thanks indeed, Clive. Now I'd like to go over to Sandra Giacono. Be great to hear from you, Sandra, and for you to introduce yourself. And I know you actually had a few thoughts on Excel, so perhaps you could just share those with quickly, and then we'll move on to talk more about data as well.
So good morning, everyone, and thanks, Louise and Gareth, for having me. I'm the Finance Training and Development Manager here at Cambridge University Press and Assessment. And one of my key responsibilities is supporting my finance colleagues in acquiring, developing all the skills and competencies they need to excel in their role and grow into the career. So yes, the last few years has been in my practice data focus heavily. My view on Excel, I really quite enjoy listening to Mark and Andrew, and it reminds me of a discussion I had in the past with colleagues. Tools like Excel, they don't make coffee. right? They don't replace kind of the knowledge and expertise that people have. They're just an enabler. They empower you to really get on with, your core skills and business. So yes, I read, there has been in the past a number of journals and articles around, how Excel was the most dangerous tool in the world. But I think it's not the tool itself, it's what we make of it. It's the person behind Excel as opposed to the system. So let's not blame Excel and computers just yet.
Thank you very much for sharing that. Brilliant. And what about data? It'd be great to hear about your data strategy at Cambridge University Press and Assessment.
Yeah, so the discussion so far focus a lot on the tools and Power BI, analytics, etc. But a few years ago, I was asked to in a previous company asked to do a quick training course, train some management accountant around a SAP business object tool, web intelligence to create report, etc. So did the course, did the training, and it fell flat. It really fell flat. And I realized that actually the issue was not the use of the system, how to use a system, how to drag and drop, how to log in, etc. That wasn't the issue. The people I had participant really, the reason why it wasn't working is because they didn't understand the data. They didn't understand where it was coming from. They didn't understand if it was accurate, if it needed to be cleaned up, where to get the data. It's all back to data. And we have a bit of the similar situation in press and assessment, where we have multiple data sources in different systems. I mean, when you think about multiple data sources, you've got diluted, scattered information, no single responsibility for that data. For finance users, I had one of our colleagues describing the steps from data to financial insight. And basically, she calculated with 50 steps. So think, for each of the data source, you log in, you extract the data, you run it in Excel, or you extract the data, run it in Excel, save, and you lather, rinse, repeat. And she calculated 50 steps. And in a month-end scenario, you multiply this by so many times. So press and assessment, we have embarked just about last year, kick-started November, December last year, on a big MI management information system where we are using big data technology to provide to finance colleagues one single source of data. So we are basically getting the data from all those multiple resources, and at the end, our finance colleagues only have one data source of data to contend with. So the objective is really to do without those convoluted steps and the manual process that come with it, to really embrace the technology. Because with a big technology like the data lake, we can use Power BI, Excel, Power Query, and really use these tools to their full capacity. So early days, and very exciting, really, because this is going to make a ton of difference. My challenge for me is really to make sure that my colleagues are skilled in the technology, and it's not easy because the technology changes quite a lot of time. I'm also training people who there's some of this technology. We talked about Python, but there's SQL, SQL, which we're going to need to get data out of the data lake. That was not on anybody's radar, really, especially when they started their career. So there's quite a lot of change, but certainly exciting.
Thank you very much, Sandra. Yeah, well, just a couple of bits from what you mentioned then that really stood out for me, actually. One was you mentioned data lake, which is a term that some people may not be familiar with. So it'd be great if you could just tell us what you mean by a data lake.
Yeah, so data lake is a massive, it's a lake. It's really, it says what it does. It's a big repository of data, raw data. So unlike business warehouse, so BW, SAP, where data is collected and then it is transformed and then it's just sent back to the end user. The data lake just collect data from multiple sources, any sources. Okay, and it gets through a level of transformation, but yeah, because we need to make sure it's got the right format, we have to put it into a table, etc. But yeah, it's a massive repository of data, and in a sense, it's raw, so it's not transformed in a way that a data in a BW system would be. And at the end, at the moment, we are so lots of data in. There is a team working on identifying the data, what data, where does it come from, getting it into the lake, working on it, putting it into table, reconciling that data, which is a big thing. We just don't throw data in there and then it comes out back again. No, there's a whole process there. We started last year, and we're starting to be able to do a plan to implement and get people to connect onto the data lake and create a report and use their Power BI, Excel to access their data.
Fantastic. That's really interesting to hear about. That does sound really, really exciting. And actually, you would, the other thing one of the things you were talking about was the upskilling with all of that, because you've mentioned Power Query and Power BI. How have you, it can feel quite intimidating as accountants, kind of like you were saying about all this change that there is, and you mentioned SQL as well. How have your staff upskilled in these new areas?
So we have a specific strategy. I have a specific strategy. Maybe finance is slightly lucky to have me because I'm really concentrating on making sure that this is happening. But we do run, so, training needs analysis, very important, which area that they need to learn. And, you need to learn what you need to learn, nothing more, nothing less. Is really what you need to get on with the job. And it's never once-off, it's continuous learning. It's a path, it's a learning journey. The tech change. Sometimes I wish Microsoft would pipe it down a little bit, because I'm doing a session on Power BI, and on the day discover that something new has come through, and I said, oh, for God's sake. So but it's really, but it's about making people aware of this is happening, but embedded this culture of learning and having that flexibility and learning, and it's a path, it's a journey. We're not alone. Nobody is alone. We have working groups. I can see Hannah Hurls here. She's a head of FMI at Press Assessment. She runs a matrix, data metrics for data-minded finance professional, where they share knowledge, share issues. We have quite a few of those communities in Press and Assessment. We have on Power BI, we have on Excel, we have one in finance on business intelligence. So it's looking at data and all that area in general. We learn from each other and we help. And I have to say, and it's really comforting. But when we mentioned ChatGPT story, I am not SQL. I haven't trying to put together a course on introduction to SQL for finance. I'm not an expert, and I was trying to establish connection between Power BI and the data lake through SQL. And somebody has sent me a little formula which I tried to tweak, and it failed. Power BI said, no, your formula failed. And so, oh my God. And so what do I do? Going to Google wasn't very helpful. Who do I ask in the organization? Who's going to be available? I need this now. So I went to ChatGPT and I copied my SQL. What is wrong with this SQL statement? Paste it. And ChatGPT told me, well, I had a syntax error. Basic, but I couldn't tell, and the error message was very obscure. And not only did it tell me what was wrong, it actually corrected the code, said this is what you should be using. I copied, because it's a copy button, pasted it into Power BI, and off I went. And all this in the time it took for me to copy and paste this SQL statement ChatGPT and then copying the correct back, it was just less than a minute, and I could get on. And it was correct, and it's just that's, you know, and so I didn't have to learn SQL.
There we go. Well, thank you very much
But,
indeed,
you know,
Sandra. Yeah. That's really interesting to hear about that use of ChatGPT there. That's great. I mean, I've heard mixed stories for sure on putting code in and what you get back, but that's fantastic to hear that, you know, it certainly can work, can't it, and find those errors for us. And the time it takes is amazing, isn't it, compared to you know, traditionally, if you're doing coding and you have an error, it's a case of leaving it, coming back and looking at it again with a fresh pair of eyes, isn't it? Even leaving it overnight, and that takes time, but a lot of time for sure, doesn't it? So that's really great to hear. There can be those shortcuts. That's really, really interesting. And you mentioned about training and the different ways to train in the communities. That was really interesting to hear about. And it just brought to my mind actually some training courses that we run at First Intuition. Actually, with Mark Proctor, we've got a Power Query course for Excel, and we're looking at Power BI as becoming very much up and coming. And also just thinking, Sandra, about the training course that we ran at Cambridge University Press and Assessment in terms of strategy and data and digital. We had a look at, didn't we, for your team? So yeah, there's lots of opportunities. So many thanks for sharing your thoughts. I'd love to go over to Jenny now. So it'd be great to hear from you, Jenny, if you'd like to introduce yourself. Jenny Blewett, and love to hear about innovation in finance in the NHS, and perhaps you could give me an example of what's happening in finance in the NHS.
Absolutely. Hi, I'm Jenny Blewett. I'm a mathematician. I was an auditor with PwC, worked in the high-tech sector, and currently work in the NHS. Used to be financial controller, but now I look after systems and improvement. And it was amazing hearing Sandra speak, because funny enough, part of what I was going to say was we're talking about ChatGPT and using it to help me solve problems in Power Query. I'm in Power BI. I absolutely love it. But to talk about the NHS, so the NHS is super exciting at the moment. We have something called One NHS Finance, and the concept of One NHS Finance is working together for continuous improvement. And the NHS, I don't know whether we're one of the biggest finance teams in the world, about 14,000 finance staff. So to get all those people linked together and talking is just invaluable. And my favourite part of One NHS Finance is we have a finance innovation forum. So we collect and peer review and share innovative solutions so that the NHS, we learn and upskill together. So it's a really exciting place to be. We recently got published on the forum in Cambridge for our innovation. We're based in Cambridge. And what we've done, it's something I've done a very long time ago with my team, and it's just going back to Excel actually. We've got some processes. We were reconciling giant pools of prepayments accounts and very, very big bank accounts. We're over £1 billion turnover, thousands and thousands of lines of reconciliation work. And it was just putting all of that into actually VBA and coding it up and writing lots of iterative loops to do all the boring work that people were doing, and saved about 5 days of time. And then went on and moved into this role, and then was putting that into the board report context, trying to get a one-click system so that you click a button and the board report will automatically update. So we did that as well, but found we needed to combine SQL and VBA and Excel in doing that. And now we're looking at the possibilities with Power BI, and we've done a demo system. I've been looking at bad debt analysis. So taking a horrible decision tree that I created actually when I was implementing bad debt, and then putting it into Power Query and putting it into Power BI. And it's amazing seeing how much better decision making you can get. It's a really blunt tool, because you can't hide behind those numbers when you see your big problems. So it's been fantastic. But the great thing about the NHS is that we're so integrated now. We can see what other people are doing. So I'm hugely inspired by my NHS colleagues. We've got a guy called Simon Oliver in Essex, and he is a Power BI wizard, and he created these fantastic insights into nursing pay and all sorts, and it's really changing the business and how they look at their costing. And there's another lady in Manchester who inspires me as well. She's called Louise McNeil, and she's fantastic. She was using SQL to do her day job, and the people around her were kind of, why is she able to do what I can do? Why is she so much quicker in doing what she's doing? And they thought, oh, I can't do that. I can't use SQL. But she shared her code with her colleagues, and they started to use her code, and they started to use SQL too, which is really exciting. And then she went even further with this, and she came from 5 different NHS organisations, and using SQL and Power BI, she's managed to do benchmarking across the whole for the cost across the whole of Lancashire and South Cumbria. Now, I don't know whether anyone knows the NHS, but that is just, it blows my mind in terms of achievement of what she did. I wonder if I came across her with, I was thinking of setting up an NHS Power BI forum, and she beat me to it. She set up a software skills network for NHS staff, and we can go in, we can learn SQL, we can learn Power BI, we can learn other apps, bespoke training, and she includes snippets of code. So we're really lucky because we've got that collaborative, ginormous team where we really need to learn from each other and upskill.
Wow, many thanks indeed for sharing that. Brilliant. Thank you, Jenny. It's really, really fascinating. There's sometimes that your sound is sort of dipping in about. I think when you're a little bit closer to the computer, it is really, really great. So just to mention that, but basically it's fine. Thank you. So it's really fascinating to hear about all that benefit and that use of SQL and everything, and getting that costing data is incredible. Perhaps you could tell us about another sort of saving measure that's been discovered. I think you mentioned one to me when we spoke earlier about the month-end process.
Yeah, so it's a presentation by a gentleman called Ed Berry in the NHS. He works at Manchester, and he talks. Well, I'll kind of do the short version of his story. He comes in and he says, "I've rocked in at 9:30." He's pretending to be a management accountant for this scenario, and he has 6 characters in his story. And he describes the whole of month-end process. Lovely story he tells. He talks about extracting the info and sending it to the budget holders, checking his emails, updating the ledger, and entry journals, and each character in the story is doing some of this process. And when he tells it, it's a much longer story, and it's very well described. And then he says at the end, why on earth am I rocking in at 9:30 on a month end and going straight for coffee? And he elaborates to say that in this story, 2 of the characters are human and the other 4 are bots. So they're using robot process automation extensively, and I'm really inspired. That's where I want to head our teams. So, for example, for invoice processing, they're processing 10,000 invoices a month using bots. So they're really trailblazing in that field.
Wow, that's fascinating to hear about. So that was what, 6 or more people previously, was it, doing all that invoice processing, and now it's the bots?
Yeah, he's describing the scenarios of various processes because they're doing bots all over the place up in Manchester. We've got a bit of an insight into it because clinicians were using it so much, which means we tend to have the software available within the hospitals.
Wow, that's fantastic. It's really interesting to hear about. That's amazing. And I think you were also telling me about how you've been looking at using AI with forecasting and budgets as well.
Yes. So this is inspired by Ed as well, at Berry Manchester. So he was telling a great story on a webinar, and he's taken 2 years worth of pay data and he put it into an AI forecasting model just to see what it would come out with. And he's done this in the past now, so he was able to compare what the AI forecasting model predicted, what humans predicted, and what actually happened in that period. And it's a lovely visual he gives, because he shows the human prediction, and they spent days on their predictions. Predicting pay costs in the NHS when we're so large is a huge effort. And it's lovely. You watch the AI and the actual, and they track beautifully on his visual. So just a fantastic kind of demonstration of what AI can do. And the humans have spent days on this work, and the AI, he estimates, have taken around 3 hours. So I was just inspired.
Wow, that's amazing to hear. So they were doing it on last year's data, for example, so they could compare it to the actuals, so you could see how it did against the actuals. How fascinating. Wow, that's amazing, isn't it? Well, I think that's takes us really nicely into our next topic, which is indeed on AI and some of the use cases for it. So many thanks indeed for sharing all those amazing insights about what's happening in the NHS. Thank you, Jenny. So yes, I was saying we're going to move on to our final topic now of AI. And of course, there's been so much discussion and hype about AI, particularly in these last few months, hasn't there? Artificial intelligence. So we're going to delve deeper on this. And I think it was one of our colleagues earlier, I think maybe Clive, who'd been talking about how AI, there's so much behind AI. There's so many different ways it's being used and different types of AI. And I heard somebody recently give a really great analogy for it, because there's lots of hype on the bandwagon about ChatGPT, isn't it? And someone described ChatGPT as like your microwave in your kitchen. It might be a very brand new and shiny and fancy microwave, but it is the microwave. And actually AI is like the kitchen, because you've got so many different ways AI is being used and so many different types of AI, and ChatGPT and the wider generative AI that it falls into is just one example, like maybe the microwave. So I thought that was a really great analogy just to help people think about how broad AI is and how many different ways it can be used. So many thanks to Jenny. First of all, we're going to go over to Tom Jameson, who I know has been looking and finding some really interesting ways to use AI in his firm. So hi to Tom, and it'd be great to hear about you if you can introduce yourself and tell us about how you're using AI in your firm.
Of course. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, I'm Tom Jamison. I'm the Managing Director of Abbygate Accountancy. I will point out that I'm not an accountant by trade. My background is leadership and 20 years in banking. So I come at this from quite a different angle to probably most people on this call today. What I want to start off by saying today is whenever you're looking to implement new technology, whether it be AI focused or anything, for me, the client is the number one thing that I'm looking at. How can this benefit our client? I'll then look at how can it benefit my team / business, but also third to that is how does it benefit me? So whenever you're looking to do anything in your business or implement, the client is at the heart of what we do. You know, if we're trying to do something to squeeze our time, we must be thinking, how can that benefit the client?
Brilliant. That's really interesting to hear. That's such a good point, isn't it? And something I certainly talk about when I do talks on strategy for AI and data and digital is definitely thinking about the client and the ultimate benefit. How's it going to help our goals in our organization? So I couldn't agree more. Yeah, so it'd be great to hear about some of the ways that you're using AI in your work and also maybe about some of the dangers and risks as well.
Yeah, of course. I mean, the easiest way to look at it is plotting your end-to-end journey, both from a client point of view, but also from an internal process. You know, we run a compliance-led business, so there's multiple different processes across our organization that have both a client and an internal process. Now, for us, is adopting AI, you know, we can run, there's so many options right now using a peer in the industry. You know, a lot of people get software drunk. You know, we're very quick to try and adopt new technology, but actually the implications of trying to do too much at once can have quite a dramatically negative effect. So for us is plotting each one of those processes. What looks like a manual process? Is there Excel involved? You know, dare I say, not so much in our business, is there paper involved? Okay, are we duplicating information? Now, if we're setting up a client on one system to then duplicate it into another, how can we cut those corners and free up more time to be able to spend with our clients? So in terms of that process, the number one process for me was that new client onboarding, right? So we're a business that has no interest in acquiring other firms. So for us, our business development is client get client, traditional marketing methods. So for us, we're looking at established businesses and making sure that onboarding process is as slick as possible. So using things like Loom with their new AI, you know, putting video content out to our new clients. Every proposal goes out with a new video. You're using Synthesia. If we can't get to a camera to be able to record a video, using an AI avatar to be able to produce content. Using Zapier to be able to connect our Microsoft bookings into our CRM system, which is Center. You know, using Ignition, which is our practice management software, connecting the dots there. As soon as a new client signs up, it kicks off our processes. All of our folders are set up in our Microsoft OneDrive. You know, the ID and VDIML checks are kicked off automatically. The processes are kicked off on Center. So making sure that we can automate as much of that as possible to free up our time to spend with the client. And that is the most important thing for us. Things like Crisp. You know, I'll do a lot of video calls. I'm not productive sitting in the same place. So I might do a video call, for example, in the middle of a busy coffee shop. I'll use Crisp AI to shut off every bit of noise around me. You and I know there's probably people working from home today. You've got dogs, there might be kids running around. Using AI to shut down that noise around you is a really sensible tool. For me, if I'm on a panel or I'm joining a board meeting digitally, using things like Assembly to take the notes, take the actions, so I can sit there without a pen and paper, right? So I can listen, I can be interested, not interesting. So for me, it's making sure that you're using that technology to really drive that client behavior. You know, from an accountancy point of view, decks, you know, we've talked about Chris talked about Silverfin earlier. They're looking to really ramp up their AI. The CRM tools like HubSpot, Salesforce, Pipedrive. Again, there's AI in everything that we're doing. We probably don't just use it, realize. ChatGPT, massive fan of ChatGPT. I have it on my desktop. What do I use ChatGPT for? Well, I use the paid for version and the plugins, and it designs all of my PowerPoint presentations for me. I give it the prompts, so I never have to build a PowerPoint presentation anymore. It will write my Excel formulas for me because I know what the output is. I could do it myself, but I'm looking to squeeze my time, right? Which means I can spend more time for the client, I can drive more profit in my business, and I can spend more time with my team helping them develop. So I think ChatGPT, whilst it's phenomenally useful, there are some dangers. I have an apprentice in my business who's just turned 18. Does he use ChatGPT? I don't encourage it because he doesn't yet know what that output is. He couldn't do that himself. I think there was a conversation earlier around how, it's all very well, I was that guy at school that got marks for showing the answer, but I couldn't really show the working out. And when you're young, you don't really understand why showing the working out is important. But as finance professionals, we need to add that credibility to show that journey. If we're just cheating and we don't know what that journey is, we will soon get found out. Okay. But again, when clients ask us to review documentation, whether it be lease agreements, things like that, as long as we're taking out the personal information, we can actually use ChatGPT or other AI assistants to support, again, that capacity squeeze. We can. Is there anything I need to worry out here? Sometimes people send me long emails. I'm not very good with long emails. Chuck it in there. Just take the personal information out first. Can you summarize this in bullet points? You get those emails in the inbox, and how do I reply to this? Right, the head in hand moment. Just pop it into ChatGPT and say, can you help me here? So for us, that helping with the process, helping our technology talk to each other, but also communication, speeding up communications with clients. Marketing. So we outsource our marketing to another team. But for us, marketing AI is really important. Now, I know straight away if somebody's just copy and pasted from ChatGPT because they haven't prompted it to use UK spelling and grammar. So there'll be Zs instead of Ss. So when you're using it regularly, you get to spot those. I'm a bit naughty in that I point people out on it. But for me, is that, marketing, certainly that content, blog posts in our industry, unless they're very fact-based, real-time, like budget-led blogs, actually we can produce content much quicker. Grammatically correct. Most people on this call today will be very numbers focused, not necessarily words. So sometimes we're not very good at writing a story as finance professionals. So actually using AI to help us along the way. Again, we know what that output is. Yes, we could write a blog, but we might sit there screwing up bits of paper for 3 hours. It's okay to squeeze that time.
Wow, that's fascinating. Many thanks, Tom. So it's all sorts of interesting use cases there. It's really, really interesting to hear about. But I love the way you put it in terms of it's great when you know what the output is, you know what you're expecting to get out of it. I think that sort of sums it really nicely as a useful thing to think about, isn't it? So you can use it in those certain cases, of which there are many for sure, but remembering the ultimate goal of looking after the client and spending time with the client. But then thinking about using it when you don't know what the output is going to be, that's where the risks come in, and that's what we need to bear in mind. So yeah, many thanks indeed for that. So what do you think will be next for AI in accounting and finance?
I think for me is the firms that, I'll just step back, the firms that aren't using it are the ones that are going to struggle. Okay, I think the next thing is that I think we'll be bringing in more, you'll see more accountancy firms with, whether it be chief technology officers, CTOs, whatever, there will be roles specific within finance businesses, especially at accountancy level, to handle that automation in-house, because the pace of change is so hard to keep up with. I think businesses will need that. And I think there's a really good space for people, certainly from a consultancy point of view, to help some of these businesses, especially the more traditional paper-based. That's a huge risk. As HMRC go more digital, that paper trail will start to disappear. For some people, that's a real challenge. So I think that, businesses need to invest in what does the future look like? What is their plan? What is their AI strategy? We have one, okay? And it's focused around client, team, business, and me. You know, that sounds selfish. I've got to make sure it works for me as well. I want to do more school runs, right?
Yeah.
If I can squeeze half an hour a day to be able to do that, brilliant.
Yeah, it's work-life balance ultimately as well, isn't it? Yeah, very much. Well, thank you very much for sharing all those really interesting insights. It's really interesting, and it's quite a rapid change, isn't it, for businesses that might be quite paper-based to go through to really full automation and using AI to its full capacity. But yeah, it's definitely a journey that we're all on, isn't it? Yeah, many thanks indeed for sharing your thoughts. And I think that takes us on really nicely to our next speaker, Marie Speakman, who is going to be talking about automation and AI. So Marie, if you'd like to introduce yourself and tell us about your work in automation and how AI is used in that role. It'd be great to hear about.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm Marie Speakman. I've been in finance for 35 years, worked in industry and set my own practice up, which I had for 5 years. And then since then, I've been consulting. 3 years ago, I was approached by my ex-boss of a software company. And he said, I think you've got something that you'd be really interested in. And it was AI, which was 3 years ago. And I thought, what the hell is it? I don't get it. And I actually worked with data scientists, and we developed an accounts receivable process, which is currently being deployed in like local councils. So that was my start to my AI journey. And since then, I partner with different AI companies to find solutions for. I did start off with accountants in practice because I thought I know their struggles because I've been there, I've struggled. So I thought the accountants in practice would be a very good place for me to start, but I found it very, very tough and slow. I think with ChatGPT, it's got easier because the awareness is now there. But before that, it was like, it was just, they just, a lot of people just didn't get it. With ChatGPT, I do think that's been great because it's brought the awareness, it's brought that, you know, we do, you know, it's out there and we've got to take it on board. It's not going away and it's moving. I think this is like the most rapid thing that we're seeing within finance. I was surprised when I got kind of back in how far behind we were, that people still were, to be honest, who moved on a lot, had not moved on. So yeah, and I think what we're seeing now, what I love is not for these, so my sweet spot is like mid-tier companies, because I think the big companies are being looked after. The smaller companies, I think the best tool for the smaller companies is using RPA, robotic process automation, to get a lot of those manual tasks to be taken care of. But in the mid-tier companies, the intelligent automation platforms are what I really love, because they're actually bespoke to that. You can actually bespoke things. You're not sticking with software that is rigid. You can actually say, well, what do we want to do? And what Sandra and Clive were saying about the data, you know, we're going to be data centric. That's going to be the thing. You know, it's not about the reports and all that. We've got to be very data centric, and we need to get our house in order, basically. Companies, if they want to use AI, generative AI, then you've got to get your house in order. So yeah, I love what Clive and Sandra were saying about the data lakes.
Thank you. Could you give us an example of how it, you know, you're using it and you see people using it in the mid-tier companies you mentioned with that intelligent platform?
Say a company, so you've got your standard software in there, and it's like looking at the pain points, really. What are the pain points in this company? One of the big ones that I really like, especially with people working from home, is the employee support, because I don't know how people are managing that situation with staff, but the employee hubs are great. You know, you can cut down on IT costs, IT support. It's can be very much a self-serve, because it's learning as well. You've got this continual learning. So whatever is going on in that company. The other thing that I really love is that we can actually, because I think a lot of companies can have problems, but they don't look to solve them. So it'll show up, you know, we're in the process, we've got these bottlenecks. So I find that really kind of great and fascinating. And then obviously, you know, the reporting side, the FP&A, the platforms where we're building in the generative AI, which is, you know, on the predictive analytics. I think that's, you know, with great data and with the tools that we'll have available, we will be very data-centric organisations, and that's where we need to go.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point you make about the data, because what is critical with all of this is having the underlying data, like, you know, Sandra talking about the data lake, for example. We need the underlying data to be accessible, don't we, to get the AI and automation tools to work on that data. Yeah,
and it needs to be good, you know, it needs to be good data.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that's really critical. Well, that's really interesting. Many thanks indeed, Sandra. Sorry, Marie, because I mentioned Sandra earlier. Really interesting, Marie, to hear about how that's being used and things like employee support and that learning tool for FP&A. It's really, really fascinating. So many thanks for your sharing your insights. We're going to move over to James now, to James Best, our last but very much not least at all. It'd be really interesting to hear from James to introduce himself and hear about some of the use cases that he's been working on in AI. So over to James.
Yeah, sure, pleasure. Thanks for hanging around. Hopefully I'll have something novel to add. So my name is James Best. I'm an independent consultant and sometime contractor. I help businesses integrate AI into their operations through augmented roles. I'm a member of the ACCA and a member of their Global Tech Forum, where I've been privileged to be exposed to research and talks of quite insightful content. I'm not a data scientist, although I have kind of dabbled in the data analysis world, but I appreciate the capabilities of it and also the dependencies for it to work well and its limitations. And when I work with my teams, it's, you know, I understand the question that needs to be answered or the problem that needs to be solved. And then I also know what good would look like if that's achieved. Now, if I can convey that to the data science team, they have the skill sets and the capabilities to develop a solution to address that. And I think that's being, you know, that's really key to enabling this to work within the finance function, is that collaborative approach and having an appreciation of what it can do and what its limitations are. So I'll share with you some specific use cases. My first one is probably not one of the most common, and that's the use of natural language generation. So the client had gone from moving their Excel reporting into a Power BI dashboard, and the Power BI dashboard, we integrated a plugin that provided natural language generation. And for those of you that don't know what it is, I'll just quickly break it down. It takes structured data and it will convert it into a narrative that's readable like it was written by a human. It's very descriptive of what's happening in the data. We used it within a variance analysis dashboard, so the budget versus cost. And on the refresh of that dashboard, it would tell us, you know, where the variances were driving in the totals. The natural language generation, you know, it's very simple. It works on rules and it's applied to structured data. But the dependency of it is the quality of data, you know, as we've heard from others. And I guess when we talk about the Excel versus, you know, Power BI or other kind of data science tools or analytical tools, accountants have had this dependency on extracting Excel from a system, and then they can manipulate and then present their reports. But when we're connecting direct to a dashboard to a source, that privilege is gone. And so you have to ensure that your source data at input is accurate and clean. Otherwise, the analytics that we put on top, or in this case, the natural language generation, wouldn't make any sense. The old adage, garbage in, garbage out. The limitations of it are, it will only tell you what's happening in the data. That's it. And so when you augment this into the business partner role, or even directly with the business owners, the idea of it is it gives them time to then go and find out why this has occurred, or what do we need to do next. And I can go back to when I was reviewing some variance analysis. It would be submitted and it would say sales are higher in X country because we sold less than we planned. You know, so there's not much insight into it, but because of the time frame and pressures on the working days, that was probably the very last thing that they ever did, because they were so focused on the reconciliation and getting the numbers right. So augmenting and you know, the role evolving of the accountants to be more business partnering and driving insight to influence decisions has been, you know, key with the natural language generation.
Wow, many thanks for sharing that. It's really interesting hearing about that, and yeah, hearing about how it can tell us what's happening in the data. Thank you very much indeed, James. And what about with decision making? How do you think AI can help with that? Like, for example, forecasting.
Forecasting, yeah. So a couple of cases. One of them I think was touched upon before, where we've used it for sales and demand forecasting, and ultimately we built a forecast engine that's using an ensemble of linear regression models. And ultimately, what an ensemble is, instead of using one linear regression model, it will take a number of different models, and you'll have a multiple outlook, and then it will take the collective wisdom as to which is more accurate. This is all obviously back tested to try and ascertain what's the right combination of models. And again, linear regression predicts future values on the past. So there's this huge dependency on having data quality, substantial amount of data. We're using 2 years worth. And, you know, it assumes that a linear relationship. So when you have an SME involved in the feedback loop, that's where you augment the role. So you don't take the output of the forecast model and then present it. You look at it, and then the human will be able to review it, add their insight, feed this back, and then you can start to bring in non-linear elements. And I guess, again, the importance on data and the collaboration and having in the organization that you can reach out to that data science capability. I don't expect the accountants to be data scientists, but if you can appreciate it, you know what you're trying to achieve, and you know what good looks like, you can collaborate with people who can put that together.
Wow, that's really fascinating to hear. Yeah, lots of things from that. That reminds me about, and I think for many of us in the audience today, we might well have learned about things like the linear regression in accounting exams back in the past, and some of us may not have thought about them much since. And it's really interesting hearing how they can be used for forecasting, and bringing in those non-linear elements as well to make it work even better. That's really interesting. And then talking about the appreciation piece, that we don't need to be data scientists, but if we can appreciate what it can do and what sort of output we're expecting, picking up on what Tom was talking about earlier as well, then we can, place some reliance and start to be able to use these systems. So that's really interesting. Many thanks indeed. Perhaps we've got time for one more example of how it can be used, AI can be used in finance.
So the other use case that we used was, I think it was mentioned again before, around cash collection. So we put together a decision tree to predict which debtors would pay on time or those that would be late. And you know, this is incredibly useful for cash flow forecasting, especially if we need to borrow cash from the treasury. You know, the amount we're paying on interest on that. So it can help ensure that we're not, overcommitting. And you know, it's very, you're getting 20 questions. The yes, no answer. Does it have 4 legs? Yes. It's a decision tree process. So it's a very simple concept. But when you put that into, you know, you apply that to lots of data at speed using technology, it helps make these predictions quicker. And I would challenge anybody to be able to do something similar within Excel. But again, you're not just taking that output and then committing to it. There's a human in the loop, which is the SME in the finance, and you're taking that information very quickly to determine, whether you think there's some bits that, you know, we need to understand more. And going back to the black box argument, This you can, it's explainable. You can go back through it. So you can work with the data science team and ask them. And one really interesting kind of outcome of this is when you're putting the decision tree together, you're looking at the different attributes to be considered, and they would be, listed in importance. And they ask the finance teams, which feature do you think is the most important to influence whether people pay on time? And what they suggested didn't even feature in the top 10 of what the data showed in the correlations. So it goes to show that, the human perspective isn't necessarily right, but it's one that is collectively agreed upon. So again, really useful and really helpful for the cash flow forecast.
Right. So from what the data, the AI could learn, find the insights about the data on the cash collections, it can then use for the forecast, in the way that humans weren't able to. They had the wrong instincts.
But basically, it was around. So there's different attributes that you're using in your decision tree, and they're listed in terms of importance. And in the top 10, the most important feature that the finance team thought was the influencer was, I think it was banking days and bank holidays. So if the banking day fell on the bank holiday, then that would input zero influence, and others that were not considered. And again, that collaborative element of it, and then talk about the black box and the accuracy. I think there's got to be this trade-off between, if it's more accurate, do we need to explain it immediately? And if you were to go through the instances where there's potential bias in the model, the data scientists can explain the bias eventually by analysing what's gone through. But when it comes down to humans and you're trying to identify and understand bias, that's pretty much unexplainable because it's just the nature of humans.
Good point. Absolutely. Well, I think that's a great point to finish on, that ultimately, humans are naturally biased as well, aren't they? So yes, there's going to be, of course, going to be some biases in the AI and the underlying data that comes through, but there is the human bias element as well. So lots to consider there. Wow, many thanks for those really interesting use cases about how AI can be used. That's really, really interesting. So many thanks indeed. Now I'd like to hand back to Gareth, who's just going to round up on today's very, very fascinating webinar. Many thanks.
Thank you, Louisa. And blimey, that has been absolutely fascinating. What a huge amount of content we've heard over the last 90 minutes. That's I have filled, and I'm sorry, I'm still a bit paper-based, but I have filled about 9 sheets of A4 with notes from the different speakers. And actually, one of the themes that really came out to me, which I think Jenny talked about it, I think Sandra talked about it, I think James talked about it, a few of the speakers talked about the importance of being aware what other people are doing. Whether it's internally, having those conversations with colleagues, whether it's externally, keeping an eye on what data scientists might be talking about, or hopefully even in this kind of format. And actually, we've run these kind of forums on a semi-regular basis. I think the last one we did was probably 6 or 8 months ago. So we maybe do these sorts of digital and tech forums twice a year. I'm quite interested, and I'd be really pleased if people might open their reactions function at the bottom of their screens. Would it be useful, because we've had some great speakers I think this morning, but actually I'm sure most of us on the call could have spoke intelligently. I mean, Sandra's colleague Hannah, I know we've talked to at length about these issues before. I know Emma Gripton was commenting through the chat box. Andy Turpin's on the call that Louisa and I have talked to at length about these sorts of issues. I can see Simon Pinion, who describes himself on his LinkedIn profile as tech obsessed. So I'm sure we've got other members of the audience who could equally have given great content. Would this sort of thing be useful on a more regular basis, perhaps on a monthly or quarterly basis, to just have these kind of roundtable discussions? So if in your reactions you could do the green tick for yes or the red tick for no, I'd really appreciate it. It might help Louisa to consider whether hosting this kind of forum on a regular basis would be useful for people, just to keep abreast of what others are doing and get some insight into some of the priorities. A lot of talk here about single data sources and data lakes. I thought was really interesting as well. And actually, I think any of those 3 topics we've covered, we could have spent the whole 90 minutes on. I almost think any of the speakers we've heard from, we could pretty much have spent 90 minutes on and dug into some of their experiences and their insight. So I'm seeing quite a lot of green ticks so far. No red crosses at this stage. So it sounds like Louisa, maybe organising this kind of forum on a regular basis would be really useful for people. So I'll leave that in your hands, Louisa, to think about whether you maybe want to run a monthly or a bi-monthly or a quarterly forum. And, you know, there's no shortage, I think, of excellent speakers. And I would like to thank, just as we round off there, I'd love to thank Jenny, Tom, Clive, Mark, Sondra, Andrew, James, Marie and Chris for fabulous insight and keeping to time as well. We're at 9:59 then, so we've kept time. So thanks to our audience as well, seen some good contribution in the chat box. And I look forward to continuing these kind of discussions with everybody over the coming, you know, months and years. As was said in the forum, this is not going away, is it? I mean, this is just becoming an integral part, I think, of the skill sets of accountants and finance professionals. And I'll just thank Louisa to finish off. Excellent discussion, Louisa. Really fascinating. So everybody, enjoy the rest of your day.